I'm Eddie Muller, and this is Noir Alley, your weekly trip to the dark side of the TCM universe. The film I have for you today is exceptional in many ways. It's The Captive City, released by United Artists in 1952. One exceptional thing about it is that it's not film noir, an exception I'm making for two reasons, beyond its being a terrific film. First, The Captive City is a landmark in the evolution of American crime films, showing how the noir movement of the 40s morphed into something else entirely, as I'll explain. The film is also an early example of the shift in the economics and technique of American movie making, from tightly controlled studio productions to commando-style independent films made outside Hollywood's picture factories. Now, what makes this doubly fascinating is that The Captive City is the work of a director synonymous with A-list product, Robert Wise, generally considered one of the best for-hire directors in the industry. He made compelling films in every genre, from sci-fi classics like The Day the Earth Stood Still, the picture he made before this one, to lavish musicals like West Side Story and The Sound of Music, and everything in between. He directed 3 full-fledged film noirs, Born to Kill, The Setup, and Odds Against Tomorrow, each one distinctive, all classics of the form. There was not a story that Bob Wise couldn't tell. In 1949, Wise and his longtime colleague Mark Robeson decided to go into business together. They had traveled the same course to their director's chairs, both starting as film editors. In fact, Robeson was Wise's assistant at RKO when Wise cut Citizen Kane. They both became directors under Val Lewton in the RKO B unit, and both graduated to A-list productions by the end of the 40s. And like many creatives, they longed to be their own bosses. So they formed Aspen Productions with the goal of making low-budget films of their own choosing. And they'd keep all the profits. Now, for their maiden effort, the partners needed to prove they were savvy producers as well as directors. So they went for timely subject matter. Throughout 1951, America had been transfixed by televised hearings of the Congressional Committee on Organized Crime, chaired by an ambitious senator from Tennessee named Estes Kefauver. It was the first time the public was exposed to the nitty-gritty reality of organized crime, the inroads gangsters had made into American cities, big and small. Wise commissioned an original script entitled The Tightrope by Alvin Josephy Jr., an editor at Time magazine who'd researched and written sensational exposés of America's vice rackets. Veteran Hollywood writer Carl Kamm helped the neophyte screenwriter turn his personal experiences into a compelling story about a journalist who uncovers an ingrained network of crime in his small town and the danger he faces trying to expose it. So, The Captive City is as much a newspaper story as it is a crime film.
Our job is to put out a newspaper.
And a newspaper's job is to tell the truth. I'm sick of walking a tightrope. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, just because it might be bad for business.
Jim, I hate to say it, but you're behaving like a kid.
Aspen made this on a shoestring. $175,000 came from United Artists, and the rest of the $250,000 budget from a New York financier they took in as a partner. Since they couldn't afford name actors, there was no way to promote the film except on its own merits, or by tying it in with those captivating crime hearings. Wise took his first cut to Washington and screened it for Kefauver. The senator was so excited, he offered a deal. He'd endorse the film by appearing in a filmed prologue and epilogue, and Wise paid him $2,000 up front and promised Kefauver 2% of the back end, which reportedly the senator donated to a charitable foundation.
I'm sure that we all realize by this time that no big-time organized public gambling is possible anywhere unless some susceptible local official or officials have been paid off.
Now, government authorities had been used to lend veracity to films before, but this was the first time a film was exploited to boost a politician's profile. Kefauver was launching a bid for the 1952 Democratic presidential nomination, and he expected national distribution of The Captive City to give him a leg up. Amazingly, he won the New Hampshire primary, which forced incumbent President Harry Truman to drop out of the race. Estes Kefauver was one of the first politicians to use visual media, both TV and film, to bolster his political career. Another exceptional aspect of The Captive City is its cinematography. Wise hired veteran cameraman Lee Garms, who had worked with virtually everybody in Hollywood, going all the way back to the silent era. Two things distinguish the look of the film. First, it was made entirely on location in Reno, Nevada. Exteriors, interiors, everything. And this was not common at the time. Interiors were almost always shot on Hollywood sets. What allowed this newfound flexibility was the use of an innovative wide-angle lens designed by Ralph Hoge. He'd been Greg Toland's assistant on Citizen Kane and was Wise's assistant on this picture. The Hoge lens, which soon became standard, allowed a depth of field unseen before, keeping foregrounds and backgrounds in equally sharp focus. Its ability to capture wider views meant the crew could film in smaller spaces than previously possible, with half as much light as was usually needed. Journalist Jim Austin is played by John Forsythe, who'd become a familiar face on American television. This is his first leading role. His wife is played by newcomer Joan Creers, who, starting with this picture, is Joan Camden in the credits. Now, there are a few familiar faces in the mix, like Martin Milner, Ian Wolfe, and Ray Teal, but for the most part, Wise used unknowns in an attempt to heighten authenticity. Released in April 1952, the first in a wave of 1950s films that shifted the crime genre from noir tales of personal passion to exposés of organized crime infiltrating American life, here is The Captive City.